Yeah. Hey, Peter.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Costanzo. I'm with ROI Consulting Group, and I'm a board member of the IT community of IFMA. This is day 5 of FM Tech Week. Thank you for all of you who have come. It's my pleasure to introduce Brett Spindler, who's an all-around good guy, plays the guitar just like me, is an IFMA ITC board member just like me, but most importantly, he's a really good proponent for smart buildings and having buildings react to occupants versus the others. Let's get ready to get set. And Brett, the session title, everyone, I'm sorry, is Making Smart Intelligent. Brett, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. I'm really excited to be here today. And I look forward to the next half hour or so with hopefully really engaging thought process. So I've asked Peter just to stay on with me. We'll share a deck as a mechanism for sharing concept and this kind of thing. But I would invite you to ask questions, challenge anything that you see. And if there's something that you'd like to really dig into, please join me in making this a really interactive conversation. So I've entitled the session Making Smart Intelligent. In real terms, over the last couple of years, what we've seen over and over again is a tendency to confuse extracting value with buying technology. There is a tendency to think about a smart building as a building that has lots of devices that can communicate. And what we see more and more is that we struggle to convert technology enablement into value, technology and enablement into an expression that will help within our context. So I really want to use this next half hour to think about how we put technology into context and start moving the conversation from smart buildings to intelligent buildings. And we begin that by fundamentally asking if we're asking the right questions. We often are in a situation where we think about, control systems and things like that, which are critically important, but we don't necessarily think about those things in relation to the purpose of my building or how I'm going to operate as an entity. There's two things that really inspired me when we start thinking about this. One of them was an advertising campaign from Honda in 2002. And they asked a really simple question. The advert was basically, what is the most commonly used word in the English language? And the conclusion is that that is okay. The definition of okay is just that it's fine. It's possible. Minimum viable product, if you like. It is something that we can tolerate. It is not something that sparks joy or sparks creativity, but it's enough to get by. The premise that they had in this advert campaign was to shift the conversation from what's good enough to the idea of what if, to start opening our thinking to a greater purpose, to something that would allow us to do something more. In 2009, Simon Sinek famously, in his TED talk, introduced this idea of the golden circle, which started shifting our thinking away from what we do and how we do it to the purpose behind how we do it. Okay. So the why in what we do. And the more we work in the technology space, the more we see the importance of understanding purpose before technology. When we talk about putting technology in context, we need to be thinking about how that technology serves our intent, serves our direction, serves our purpose, not just that we're putting technology in place. It's got to be useful and drive value and ultimately bring greater value than what it costs. At the end of the day, if we're not seeing value from what we put in place, then we're probably putting the wrong things in place. So when we think about that, we really think about the fact that from a traditional thinking perspective, we think about a building or the operation of a building in silos. We think about security systems. fire systems, room booking systems, guest management systems, electrical infrastructure, mechanical infrastructure, all as single entities. Half the time, these things don't react or interact with each other. So you have all of these single moving concepts, if you like, inside the space. And then we implement on top of that our business systems, our IWMS or our accounting systems that really drive the business or the purpose of the building. But we don't think about these things together. We don't think about the business of the building in relation to how the building itself operates. And this is one of the things that we think fundamentally has to change in how we're doing things. We need to start converging the purpose of the physical asset, the purpose of the building, okay, with the way we control it. When we start doing that, we start thinking about how we can change the way we operate. So we've just got a quick poll that's popped up, and I'd like to, as we talk through this, for you guys to think about where you are in this space. It's very easy to deploy technology platforms and technology systems that serve themselves in isolation. But the more we work in the space, the more we see the importance of driving those things together, converging those systems so that we can think in a more holistic and a wider basis, right? We can start asking questions like, can you actually impact the value of my asset by understanding how healthy my plant equipment is? Can we impact how we insure our buildings based on how we can reduce the risk of fire in our space, and how we can start bringing all of these things together? So interestingly, just on that poll, we've got about 91% of people who've done something and plan to do more, which is more or less, if let's be honest, what I was hoping we'd see, because in real terms, the beginning is often the hardest part of this. So I would challenge all of us to think about how we now move to the next phase. There's a really interesting concept that we're starting to promote really actively around maintenance for buildings, which is this idea of objective-based maintenance, maintaining our infrastructure in a way that allows the building to serve its purpose, prioritize what we're doing based on why we're there, why we are there, why the building exists, and why we are within that space. So how we start doing that, and how we start thinking about that in relation to our technology base, is to think about how you bring the technology together in a single space to start orchestrating value. Now, for me, it's really important. We don't ever want to look at removing, the business units or the containers in which things work. But what we do want to do is have things talk to each other so we can drive maximum value. This is how we think about things, right? So ideally, what you have is an incoming data source. What we want to do is then capture that data and normalize it. So what we want to be able to do is understand, where is it coming from? How do we understand the data across multiple sources and be able to understand what we're looking at, which includes contextualization. Then to start monitoring that data and using it to drive analytics. And then from there to actively drive change in the built world. One of the things that we think is super important is that we understand that unless we affect physical change, that a virtual solution has very little value. Looking at our asset online in a pretty picture is great. Yeah, it's pretty. But what do we do with it, and how do we take what we see in the digital world and make sure that how people experience the space is radically changed because of that digital solution? So there's lots of ways to think about this kind of thing. One of the examples I'd like to share with you is just how we've thought about things from a building analytics or an HVAC analytics perspective, right? So historically, and there's lots of offerings on the market that does this. You can implement a system that will deploy either AI or fault detection or FDD techniques to understand either how your mechanical or your electrical infrastructure works. One of the techniques associated with this will be looking at how equipment was designed to perform, map it against how it does perform, and then look for deviations in performance. So you're really looking for equipment that's doing something different from what it was designed to do. That gives us a lot of value associated with understanding root causes, failures, and overall health. But those platforms tend to see themselves as a standalone platform that is the system of record for those actions. When you start thinking a little bit differently, you've got to ask how you undertake the actions identified by those platforms. And in our traditional approach, on one side, you have the analytics and the recommendations, and on the other side, you have the actions that happen. By pulling together analytics and work order management, so an integration of a fault detection platform and a work order management CAFA and IWMS environment, you can start thinking about how you take recommendations or digital insights and move them into an individual's normal workday. And we think this is really important. We have this tendency often to look at wanting to expose what a digital platform has done, which adds an additional work stream to someone's life. By removing that extra view and just inserting this information into how people do their day jobs, we're finding that we have a greater tendency just to do it because it's now part of how I work every day. And what we're seeing from this is a greater tendency to solve problems that are coming before they happen. It's a really exciting process. It's not super innovative, but what it does is it starts us thinking differently about how we interact our business systems and our operational systems, and can create some genuine value. When we think about the concepts that we've just talked about, the importance of objective comes to me in the forefront of this thinking. So within Schneider, we have a big project. It's called the Impact Buildings Program. And it is the idea that if we take something to market, if we want to promote something, we should drink our own champagne. We're a French company, Peter, so we don't eat our dog food. We drink champagne, always champagne. And it's really a concept that says, okay, well, if we say we can do this, how are we doing it for ourselves? And where you start is asking what your purpose is. So for us, within the building context, what we've done is we have looked at setting out 7 core objectives. Okay. We haven't asked what technology needs to be applied. We've asked what are our objectives. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, we talk about sustainability, energy management, how we work within our workplace, really to create a better place for people. We'll often talk about better for people, better for planet, how we drive our operations, improve our asset management, and that's not only from an HVAC or plant asset, but also a full building asset perspective, how we manage our portfolio, and then how we manage our data. Once we've established the objectives, we think about measures. When we understand how we're going to identify success in those objectives, at that point, only at that point, do we start talking about what technology is needed. So coming back to the title of this thing, the reality is what we're trying to do is put technology into the right context. Technology has got to be the servant of purpose. If we invert this, what we end up with is a whole lot of technology that we're not really sure what to do with or how we extract value. And if I look very honestly at the projects that we feel have not been effective, it's the projects that do not have a clearly defined intent or purpose. We had a very interesting conversation with a customer a while ago who really wanted to digitize but couldn't conceptualize why they wanted to digitize. And so a lot of the thinking has got to be identify your intent, then build on that the technology stack that meets that intent. The other thing that this does, which I think is incredibly useful, is it starts us on a journey of AI preparedness. We see such a rapid change in that space when we think about the advent of large language models and generative AI and the move towards agentics. That space is moving really fast. There is a reality that all of those models have to be fed from foundational data. That the expression of things and how we use things will change really quickly. But at the underlying source, we have got to have a solid technical strategy. So again, when we start thinking about objectives, measures, and then how technology serves that, we also put ourselves in a place to make sure that we are able to serve potential AI use cases because we have thought about where we're going and how we'd like to use the data. So what I have up on the screen, actually, just interestingly for you guys, is how we've thought about an implementation for our new headquarters in Dubai. And this is specifically the process that has gone through to identify which of our own products we've put in place to serve specific measures to serve an objective. And if this is interesting for you, please reach out. We do have some really interesting information online about how we've approached this building and the results that we are already seeing. So when we look at the implementation of this thought process across a variety of geographies and customers, as well as our own estate, we can start to see that there is genuine, tangible value that can be extracted from thinking primarily about purpose and intent, and then going to the digital or the technology strategy from the intent. Okay, there's a reduction in energy, in carbon, reduction in man hours associated with maintenance, with complaints, and improvement in how people are experiencing buildings, a willingness to participate in their local spaces. So in every aspect of things, we see a real tangible impact in how those spaces are driving value. One of the things that drives some of this thinking is if we come back to JLL's 330-300 principle of $3 per square foot per year on utilities, 30 on space, and 300 on people. A lot of this thinking enables us to start thinking about how work we do in any given space serves the other space. So if we go back for a second to the example I've just used here, which is really around HVAC optimization and how we're driving improved health in equipment. Improved health in air handling equipment drives a greater experience for people in the space. It improves air quality, it reduces complaints. So while we might be working in the utility space, our impact may be felt where people exist. Okay. So really important thinking for us. So here I thought I would just bring 3 examples of where we've adopted this thinking and where this has been deployed at scale in the real world, right? So in one example, in a large multi-tenanted building in Brussels, we've implemented the same thinking that we've been talking about here, but we go from the operational technology integrated into the IT or the business systems for the building and into tenancy and how tenant agreements are managed. We have a single API that enables us to get contextualized, normalized data from that full environment. And then we are free from an expression standpoint to say, what do you want to do today? It gives us the ability to be future ready, AI ready, but at the same time, to have practical application and practical deployment of technologies that touch people on a day-to-day basis. make their experience of the building and of the space just that much easier. One of the things that we think is really exciting in this space is that we can start driving control of space. So whether that's app control of lights, blinds, air, temperature, or billing of space, we can drive all of these things through a single converged environment, which will look at tenancy agreements, rights managed through that tenancy agreement, and then how equipment controls that space. Very exciting project, and driving that controlled the consolidated data environment, or we talk about the digital nervous system, gives us some really powerful opportunity to drive improvement. We have another great example of the Sidara headquarters in London. And what's really exciting about this is, well, we can drive some really good third-party scoring, so smart score and this sort of thing. We've also had enough time with these guys to identify whether or not this approach actually delivers value. So in the download section for this session, we have a white paper really on the sustainability and the sustainable impact on connecting room booking systems to your control. The simple idea, a little bit like the example we showed earlier with maintenance improvement, was to say, if I want people to experience space in a really good way, I want to, rather than react to people in space, I want to plan for them to be there. So I want to cycle air before people are in a meeting room. I want to control the raising of blinds, the turning on of lights, and these sort of things in a proactive way, so people feel that the space is ready for them. And we can do this simply by connecting what we already have together. We think this is a super important principle. This is not always about adding more or buying new. It's often about driving in and looking at what I already have. What investment have I already made? And thinking about how I expand the value associated with my existing investment. And this is a great way of looking at how you can do things. Again, one of the things that I think was incredibly powerful, what was delivered with Sidara, was it was driven by intent and from purpose. So the organization knew from the beginning exactly what they wanted to achieve and why they wanted to achieve it, and then set out to achieve a specific objective. And then applying technology to support that objective becomes much easier. And then the final one here is just to share you a little bit of how we're thinking from a Schneider standpoint about driving value through the building. And what we're looking at in real terms is significant change to how we drive cost into our estate, which is a pretty large estate, 650 buildings, about 5 million square meters. So in real terms, sizable estate, driving consistent and consolidated approach to deploying technology, using the right platforms to do the right things, okay? And being very clear about our purpose and our intent behind these things. So the question we ask right at the beginning is, how do you get started, right? As you guys have indicated in the poll, a lot of you already started the journey, but we really think that if we're starting from nothing, the key here is to begin. A good friend of ours, Neil Ross, who leads the McKesson real estate organization, always says you can't steer until you move, right? And I think it's a great example of how we think about the ability to progress. We have to start moving. So always start small. You don't have to do anything that's on a massive scale to begin the journey. But do test for value. We still see a lot of language in the market about proof of value, sorry, or proof of concept. A lot of concepts have been proven. Often the question is more about whether or not I can prove value to me and value to my organization in adopting and deploying technology. The second thing to do is start to look at how you drive value through those deployments. And finally, as you can see, really around the industrialization piece is think about how this thing gets big, right? So what we do see a lot is often quite easy to test a single building, a small space, and then the question is, how do you deploy this on a wider basis? I would say to you, in any of these sort of things, think very clearly about how this prepares you for AI, and the evolution of AI, and how much we trust the results that we're seeing from AI. What I would say as we're finishing off here is that Daniel Stonecipher is running the ITC podcasts moving forward. He and I will be talking about the idea of engineered trust boundaries and really thinking about how you create tangible ways to manage direct impact of AI on our spaces, and how we ensure that we have a trust environment and the right mechanisms to contain things within that. So I think we're pretty much at time, Peter. I don't know if we have any questions or if it's time to wrap up.
So we've got 4 minutes. I've got one request, the white paper that you referred to.
Yes, sir.
That part, I don't, can you provide a link for that or something?
Yes, with pleasure. We'll work with the guys and we'll shoot that out in information after. It is in the registration page. I think there is a link there already, but we can certainly follow up with that.
Okay.
It's a really interesting paper because what it does is it looks at a year's worth of operation in a defined space and says, if we link how we intend to use the space with how we control the space, what does that do from an experiential standpoint, from a carbon standpoint? And we've showed very clear savings associated with the operation of the space without negatively impacting how people experience it. So yeah, we're really excited about that.
Okay. Got another question. What are the pitfalls when you're building this digital strategy?
I think it's a great question, Peter. From what we see is often we don't think about what this means at a portfolio level. So we'll start with an idea that can be implemented in a building. And when it comes time to scale that out across more than a space or two spaces, it can be extremely challenging to do that. That's the one thing. And then the other thing, which I hope I've mentioned a few times now, is we sometimes get obsessed with the technology rather than the why we're using technology. We have the cart leading the horse, right? We're all about deploying the technology instead of asking the question, why are we deploying that technology and how is that going to serve me, right? Because technology has to serve us, not us serve the technology.
Okay. Any other questions? We got 1 minute left. Don't see anything in the chat. So Brett, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. I want everyone to let you know that the sessions continue. Pick up again at 1 o'clock Eastern with Autodesk. And Brett, thank you so much for your presentation. Everyone have a good day. Goodbye.
Wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity, Peter.